Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today we've got a video for you where we look at another one of the blueprints that's been found in the museum's collection. This particular one seems to date all the way back to 1940 to show what they were going to build the wardroom to look like. And it's really interesting. The wardroom is one of those spaces that has never changed uses over the ship's career. On day one, it was the ship's wardroom. When the ship was decommissioned, it was the ship's wardroom. So today, when you visit the museum, you're seeing the space as it would have looked at the end of the ship's career. However, it's really interesting to see how a little bit of the layout of the room does change over the ship's career. And having this, I was going to say original document, this copy of an original document, this sort of original document in its own right, really helps us inform what that space would have looked like when the ship was first built. So first of all, this is a blueprint, but it's on paper. You can see that the blue of the blueprint and the blue overlapping, the ink there is a little bit different. You can see the edge here where it was a little bit ripped up. Now it's like all faded and worn. You can even see here in the middle of the plans, we got these two dark blue patches where, like this one's right where a crease once was. And that corner got ripped out and they patched it with tape and then they made this copy of it. So this is an original, as in it dates back to when the ship was in service, but it is not the first copy of this plan. It is a copy of the original hand-drawn, produced blueprint. So, depending on how you're going to define originality. But this is dated all the way back to September 5th, 1940. That's just a couple of months after construction of New Jersey and Iowa had started. Interestingly, it is marked Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Kentucky. Those ships are all authorized later in 1940, but Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Kentucky names are scratched out, and here at the top of the blueprints it says only Iowa and New Jersey. So one day I have to find another copy of this blueprint and see how the later Iowa-class battleships differed from us, because the wardrooms are in the same spaces on all these ships. They've got roughly the same footprint. I can't imagine there's too much in the way of differences. However, clearly they redesigned something in the space and issued new plans for those later ships and stroked out that these were not going to be used. One of the things I especially like about blueprints like this one is that they go through and they draw the furniture that's in the space. And it's just line drawings, but it's a good enough depiction of the object that we can tell what type of chair they're depicting or what kind of end table they're depicting. So that's really cool to be able to see. And then they've got a number code on them, which comes over to this side over here, where it lists all of those and how many, let's see, Type 1 steel chairs were in there. I suspect, based on the drawing, that now we know a Type 1 steel chair is that what I've called a tanker chair or a captain's chair. They've got like the upholstered arms and things like that, and you can see those depicted in the drawings. And those are steel chairs, so it lines up. That's the kind of chairs that we have in the wardroom right now. So it's real interesting to see that that's accurate. Something I didn't expect to see, the base of the conning tower just forward of the wardroom, it actually cuts into that space, is listed as the Armory. That's what it still is, but many of the Armory spaces there off of the wardroom were not always that. So for example, on these two ends here, these two spaces are listed as 40mm magazines, which we knew that's what they started out as, but by the 1980s, they're converted into small arms lockers. So it's interesting to see that the Armory here has always been an armory and didn't start out as like a 40mm clipping room for the ammunition that's going over to the magazines or something like that. So that was a cool find. Associated with those 40mm ammunition magazines are some features that I didn't know existed and didn't know were there. If you look here, on both sides by these magazines, right outside the door, there are a pair of things called ammunition passing cupolas and decanting scuttles. So those are built into the overhead, and they're like these revolving sorts of things where you could pass the clips of ammunition up to those cupolas, and somebody at the top could like open up a roller door sort of thing to take that ammunition and take it over to the gun mount itself. Back on the fantail in the port side 40mm mount, there is like a roller door structure to get ammo from down below. The ammunition is in the magazines, they're pulling the clips of it out and passing it up, and presumably those are feeding the two 40mm mounts that are up on, some folks have called it the veranda deck, the 01 level, Missouri's surrender deck. There's a pair of 40mm guns up there, one on each side, right outside the captain's cabin and what is now the admiral's cabin on the port side. Which is interesting because the level of conning tower directly above this is also a 40mm clipping room, which has doors where they're passing 40mm ammo out to those guns as well. So it makes you wonder if this was the designed way to get ammo up to them, and then they decided it was easier to just do it on that upper level, or if that particular gun was being fed by multiple magazines. Not entirely clear at this point. Sometimes finding blueprints like this just raises more questions than they answer. There are some pieces depicted in here that are very clearly couches or love seats, depending on the size of them, but like, yeah, multi-person cushioned seating apparatuses. But the Navy doesn't call them couches. They're listed as transoms. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, it looks like a couch. Why is it called a transom? Transoms are horizontal structural members at the stern of a ship. So specifically, if you go back to an old wooden type sailing ship, remember you're always trying to cross the enemy's T because the bow and the stern are the weakest parts. So if you can put shots in there, it's going to damage them. Well, to strengthen those areas, they put transoms in. So why would a structure a little bit forward of a midships on the main deck of a battleship with a couch in it be called a transom? It reminded me of my days working on Constellation, the Civil War era sailing ship in Baltimore's Inner Harbor. And in the captain's cabin on Constellation, there is, I always referred to it as a settee. There's a big plank, a horizontal framing member that goes across the whole room, and so they put cushions on top of it, like couch cushions. Once upon a time, that would have been the only couch on a ship. It's on the transom, so you go and have a seat on the transom, and just like the head is called the head because the bathroom used to be at the extreme bow of a sailing ship, at the head of the ship, the couch used to be on top of the transom at the stern. So here we are, centuries later, literal centuries later, and we're still referring to these things as transoms. I'd never heard of that term, though, as the Navy calling couches transoms, but here it's very clear in these blueprints. It's very cool to see. The other cool thing associated with that, something that we didn't realize was the case, this depicts a lounge area. It's got a section of the room right where the battleship's current lounge is. I wouldn't say that it is walled off like the current one is, but they use a series of bookcases to kind of like block off an area as a sitting area with these transoms in it and bookcases and whatnot, as an officer's lounge. So that was something that I thought was added much later in the ship's career as the number of officers on board gets reduced, as the entire crew size gets reduced over time. But that may not be the case. Keep in mind, a plan is just a plan, and just seeing this depicted here doesn't mean that's how the ships were actually outfitted, and that may be why these plans don't apply to any of our sister ships. as the crew size is being enlarged, especially as fleet flagships with admiral staffs on board, lots of officers, that may well entail removing these lounges and replacing them with additional tables. You can see from these blueprints that it is more tables than are in the wardroom right now, which is also interesting to see. And the final piece that's interesting here, there are at least 2 pieces of furniture in the lounge which are listed as cigar lockers. Wouldn't be an officer's wardroom without cigar lockers. Never mind that you're right next to several 40mm magazines. These magazines would have more likely been akin to ready service lockers. You'd only have them loaded when you're in a war zone. Probably aren't taking too many cigar breaks when you're in a war zone. And then in actual combat, these would be down below. What are some other cool things that you noticed in this blueprint? Let us know in the comments section down below. You ready to convert your dining room to have all the same features? Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.